He laughed in her face. Right there, in front of everyone. Thousands of people watching, lights hammering down from the rafters, the noise of the arena rolling like waves. But that laugh, it wouldn't last long. The cameras caught it perfectly. Dwayne Johnson tilting his head back, flashing those perfect white teeth, the smirk curling into something cruel. He had just leaned into the microphone, his voice booming with that signature bravado, the kind that could fill an entire stadium on its own. She might be strong, he said, pausing for effect, strong for a woman. But not for me. The crowd reacted like a single living creature. Laughter, whistles, claps, that sounded more like slaps. Some cheered because they wanted the spectacle, others jeered because even they felt the sting of the words. The sound swirled in the air, bouncing off concrete and steel, amplifying into something that pressed on the chest of every person in the building. And in the middle of that storm stood Ronda Rousey. She didn't move, didn't smile, didn't flinch. Her jaw was locked, her shoulders perfectly square. Her eyes, sharp, unblinking, stayed fixed on him. There was no glare, no grimace, nothing theatrical. Just silence. Cold, deliberate silence. And somehow that was worse than any insult she could have thrown back. A camera zoomed in on her face, projecting it onto the giant screen above the ring. The audience saw it. That stillness, the way her lips pressed into a line so tight it almost disappeared. No words, no emotion, but the absence of reaction became its own statement. It said more than defiance. It said danger. The air shifted. What had been a comedy bit seconds ago suddenly carried weight. Some in the crowd stopped laughing. A few murmured to each other. The laughter now sounded nervous, as if the arena realized they might have misjudged what they were about to witness. Johnson, though, thrived on that edge. He lifted his chin, soaking in the reaction like heat on his skin. The showman in him couldn't resist milking it further. He spread his arms wide, pacing along the ropes as if they were theater curtains he alone could control. His voice rang out again. You all came here for entertainment, right? Don't blink. This is going to be quick. He tapped his wrist theatrically, miming a watch he didn't wear, and the crowd exploded again. Half delighted, half offended. The noise doubled back on itself, echoing in waves of approval and protest. Ronda still hadn't moved. It was strange, the way stillness could seize the room more tightly than noise. For a moment, despite the chaos in the stands, it felt quiet between them. The bright white light seemed colder, sharpening the sweat on Johnson's temples, reflecting off the ropes like razor wire. The faint metallic tang of the ring mixed with the smell of popcorn and spilled beer. Time stretched. Johnson, perhaps unsettled by her lack of reaction, leaned forward, gesturing at her as though presenting a reluctant guest. Look at her! Ice cold. I almost feel bad. Almost his grin widened, but the edges of it already showed strain. The crowd picked up on the shift. Subtle, but there. What was meant as mockery now carried a hint of self-defense. A man trying to keep control of a stage that didn't feel as secure as before. Ronda finally moved. She tilted her head slightly, just enough to let the shadow slip across her face, and the camera caught the faintest narrowing of her eyes. No microphone, no words, just that. The reaction was instant. A low rumble rolled through the arena, people nudging each other, whispering like witnesses to something dangerous about to happen. The anticipation thickened, almost physical, hanging in the air like static before a lightning strike. Johnson gave a short laugh, but it came out sharper, tighter. He circled, throwing glances at the crowd, desperate to keep the spotlight on his terms. His voice, once playful, now held a faint edge of defensiveness. Don't get too excited. You're going to be disappointed. But the audience didn't believe him. They could sense it, something he couldn't yet admit. That laugh of his, the one that had started everything, echoed only in memory now. It had carried weight when he threw it, but standing across from her, that weight was slipping away. The smirk looked thinner, stretched too tight across his face. And as the referee stepped forward to signal the beginning, the noise in the arena changed again. Not laughter, not cheers. A strange, rising roar that was less about entertainment and more about hunger. They didn't just want a show anymore. They wanted to see what would happen when silence finally answered arrogance. Ronda shifted her stance, feet planting firmly, shoulders rolling loose. That was all. A single, minimal movement. Yet the audience gasped as if they had seen the first crack of lightning across a black sky. And Johnson? For the first time all night he didn't smile. Just wondering, where are you watching from? Write it down, Bello. He played to the crowd first, not to her. Chin high, chest out, he moved in a slow circle, arms spread wide like the ropes belonged to him. He didn't look at Ronda. He looked at the audience, feeding on their noise, waiting until the building bent to his rhythm. "This won't take long," he said, voice rolling like a wave. "Don't want anyone saying I was cruel." Half the arena roared approval. The rest booed, sharp and mean. The sound split the air like glass. People chose sides with their bodies, standing, sitting, waving arms, until the stadium itself seemed cut down the middle. Ronda didn't answer. She rotated her wrists once, knuckles cracking, eyes following him without tilt or blink. Calm, expressionless, her silence only deepened the tension. He gave them theatrics, snapping a jab in empty air, clapping for the crowd. A quick twitch of his right hand, sharp enough to make most flinch. She didn't. He laughed at his own joke, sold it with a wide gesture, then leaned forward. "Come on. Don't blink. I'll be gentle." The referee signaled, and the bell's thin chime sliced through the roar. He lunged first. Heavy feet, shoulders squared, mass over finesse. A probing jab, then another, closing space with weight rather than skill. He reached for a collar tie, trying to muscle her head down. She let him miss, guiding his wrist aside with the back of her own, a movement so small the front row barely saw it. He pumped another punch, this one harder. She bent just enough, the glove hissed past her ear. He grinned to the crowd, pretending it had been intentional. The audience leaned forward, waiting for the collision. He gave it to them. Shoulder low, head fake, drive forward with all that power. For a heartbeat the ring shrank, his frame filling her sightline, the corner post looming behind her. People inhaled and froze. Silence. Then geometry saved her. Her left hand brushed the crook of his bicep, her right forearm tilted flat, hips rotating a fraction. His shoulder, meant to slam her, cut through air. His balance staggered, steps tangling, only just recovered. He didn't fall, but the momentum promised to the crowd dissolved. The arena erupted. Gasps, shrieks, a commentator forgetting to stay composed. Thousands of throats let go at once. Johnson reset, bouncing twice, but the grin no longer looked natural. Sweat glimmered on his temple. "Okay," he muttered, half to himself, half to the rafters. He tried feints again, slapping at her lead hand, then a shove toward the ropes. She redirected with 2 fingers on his triceps, sliding his bulk 6 inches off course. He recovered with theatrics, but the crowd sensed the shift. Some shouted for her, some for him. The noise fought itself, building a drumbeat in the stands. He snapped, "You want impact? I'll give you impact," and charged into a body lock. His arms stretched around her torso, certain this time. But her knee slid into the inside of his thigh like a wedge under a door. His hips froze. His arms closed on nothing. Another wave of silence, heavier this time. Then she touched him for real. Her right hand cupped his wrist, her left hovered near the elbow, weight shifting from toe to heel. His shoulder line broke, elbow pointing wrong. Not pain, not yet. Just a message. A note slipped under the door. She could rearrange him whenever she wanted. By the time his brain processed it, she had already stepped aside. The crowd detonated. Beer spilled on shoes, phones shot up like lighters at a concert. A woman laughed out loud from the shock. His face tightened. He flicked a glance at the front row, at the critics with folded arms. A crack. He yanked his eyes away as if burned. He tried again, sharper. A stiff left, a level drop, a true shoulder rush this time. Old weapons, executed clean. The building held its breath. Her feet whispered across the canvas. A half step back, pivot on the ball, catch on his wrist. His engine revved into a corner he didn't expect. He stumbled once, top rope brushing his shoulder, hand grabbing the cable for balance. From the third row, someone yelled, "Too fast for you?" The words landed like a lash. He forced a grin, shoulders rising and falling in a heavy breath. But the crowd had seen. Across from him, Ronda hadn't changed expression. Still calm, still ice. But her steps said what her face didn't. She was letting him spend himself. He shook out his hands, rolled his neck, exhaled through his nose. The chant in the stands grew, not words, just pressure. He lunged again, ugly now, forearm thrust toward her collarbone. She redirected with one hand, pressed the tendon of his triceps with the other. His arms stopped obeying. The first flicker of panic crossed his eyes. Private? Denied? The crowd didn't see the panic. They saw a giant turned statue by a woman's precision. He ripped free with force, snarling, not for show, but to convince himself. She gave his arm back without resistance, already moving to deny him angle and rhythm. He drove his forehead forward, trying to crowd her. She dipped her chin, letting it graze. Her palm slid behind his head, thumb brushing the hinge of his jaw. Light, but enough to remind him of a lever he'd forgotten. He jerked away, back hitting the rope. The smell of heat and spilled sugar filled the air. A child shouted her name. Someone whispered, "Watch her hands," as though advice could cross the ropes. He rushed again, desperate, shoulder and arms crashing forward, all torque, no plan. She stepped offline, brushed his wrist, lifted an elbow just enough. His force vanished, like a punch thrown underwater. His eyes finally asked a question. Hers didn't answer. The arena swelled, sound blurring into a single furious note. He planted his feet, jaw locked, showmanship gone. If he couldn't clown her, he'd try to crush her. He set himself to collide, determined to end the doubt. And then she shifted her stance. Barely. The ball of her foot kissing canvas, and the angle of the entire night tilted. The grin was gone. His chest rose too fast, sweat rolling from his hairline to his jaw, dripping dark spots onto the canvas. The crowd sensed the change before he moved. Cheers turning sharper, boos heavier, every sound pressing against the lights overhead. Dwayne Johnson had stopped playing entertainer. He was now a fighter trying not to lose the stage. He lunged, heavy and direct, hands reaching for a clinch. Ronda let him come close, her forearm slipping between his arms, her shoulder tilting just enough. His grip brushed her triceps, then vanished into air. He growled low, audible only to the first rows. She didn't blink. He threw a short hook, ugly but powerful. She dipped an inch, the glove scraping past her hair. He stepped again, shoulders colliding, forehead grinding forward. She tucked her chin, letting his weight slide harmlessly, and pressed a palm against his head, steering him half an inch off center. Enough to break his balance. He tightened his arms, and that was the opening. A sudden torque, her foot hooking behind his heel, her hip nudging forward, her hand clamping above his elbow. For a heartbeat the giant tilted, his frame no longer his own. He ripped free, snorting, forcing himself upright. The arena roared anyway. He managed to tie her up chest to chest, his underhook deep, jaw clamped. He lifted, preparing the slam that the crowd craved. The noise rose, thousands leaning forward. But her foot traced a half-moon behind his, and his engine stalled. She stole the angle, used his paws as leverage, and rolled him across her hip. He hit the mat flat, a door slamming in an empty room. The sound silenced the building for half a second. A man in the 10th row cursed aloud. The cameras zoomed in on the little things, his fingers twitching, her knee hovering near his ribs in case he tried to burst up. She didn't finish him. She stepped back, expression calm, offering him space. It felt like a gift he didn't deserve and an insult he couldn't ignore. He stood, face tightened, sweat darkening the corners of his shirt. From the barricade, a voice cut the silence. "She's got your number." He snapped his head toward the sound, then away, ashamed he had looked. He stormed back in, throwing rights and lefts without rhythm. She redirected each one, 2 fingers tapping his wrist, a palm pushing his ribs, a pivot sliding him past her. Each failed rush drained him. His grin was gone, his eyes wide, a shine that wasn't just sweat. Then came the moment that shook him. His forearm pressed across her collarbone, a strong frame finally holding. She didn't fight it. She tilted her shoulder, caught his wrist, and straightened his arm against his will. No pain, just proof. He stumbled back, realizing his own body had obeyed her command. The crowd hissed through their teeth, one sharp sound like a cold wind. He tried again, driving her toward the corner. His lift felt real, hips under, spine braced, but she slid her foot between his, drew a neat circle, and his balance betrayed him. His center floated a fraction too long, and she seized it. He folded onto the mat with a thud that knocked breath from his lungs. The lower bowl exploded. Cheers, curses, disbelief. Strangers hugged, beer splashed. A boy lost his shoe jumping on his seat. The referee leaned in, then out, sensing this wasn't the end, but something worse. A lesson. Johnson rolled to his knees, jaw set, eyes fractured. The mask was broken. This wasn't his fight anymore. It was hers, and he knew it. Still, pride dragged him upright. He spat red from a bitten lip, wiped it with his glove. Pain was language he spoke. He rushed again, one last desperate charge, shoulder lowered, arms wide. She let him come. Then she stepped into his path, elbow sliding under his, hip cutting his base. For a heartbeat, he was airborne, weightless, his bulk irrelevant. He landed flat, breath leaving him in a sound too close to surrender. Ronda didn't pounce. She stood over him, calm, her gaze unreadable. She whispered something, too soft for microphones. His eyes flicked up, confusion breaking through the anger. The crowd shifted from roar to question. Why didn't she finish? Why let him rise? Did she want him standing? He pushed to his feet, slower now, legs heavy. She gave him one step of space, inviting him forward. The audience buzzed, not with triumph or contempt, but with expectation. Something was about to happen that no one could predict. The referee edged closer, hand half raised, sensing what the crowd couldn't. The next second might matter more than everything that had come before. The arena had shifted. The laughter was gone. This was no longer a spectacle. This was something raw, dangerous. The lights burned hotter, white beams bouncing off sweat and canvas. The crowd's sound had changed too. No jokes, no casual chants, just pressure. Every voice carried an edge, as if people weren't just watching anymore, they were participating. Dwayne Johnson knew it. He rolled his shoulders, jaw set, chest heaving. The showman was gone. He crouched lower, ready to force the fight onto his terms. He came forward with a shoulder strike that landed flush against Ronda's sternum, a heavy collision that thudded through the ropes. The first row flinched from the sound. She staggered a fraction, just enough to make the audience gasp, but then angled her foot, let her hips absorb the impact, and slipped free. Johnson followed immediately, wrapping hands around her triceps, hips lowering for the big throw. He wanted noise, wanted authority. His quads fired, back straining, but her forearm pressed flat across his chest, not pushing, only redirecting. He felt his grip unravel against his will. He cursed, swallowed the word, and drove again, dropping lower, head at her ribs, arms tightening for a lift. The arena leaned forward, convinced she was about to fly, but her right foot planted like a nail, her left hand caught the back of his arm, and his engine stalled. He lifted, and nothing moved but him. Her spine shifted, guiding his hips off track. He stumbled a half-step, saved by brute force, but the effort showed. His teeth clenched, sweat dripping in silver streaks. For 3 exchanges he slammed his shoulder into her, rhythm heavy, mean. The second barely moved her. The third nearly forced her weight back, the first true compromise of her balance. The audience roared, half rising, thinking he had cracked her armor. She twisted his neckline with a palm, pivoted, and the entire exchange flipped. He tripped backward into the ropes, grabbing cable to stop the fall. Cameras caught the flash of rage across his face. Silence spread. Thin, sharp silence. He stood in it, chest heaving, jaw quivering, eyes locked on her. Hatred wasn't the right word. Fear was closer. He had expected resistance. He hadn't expected inevitability. Ronda didn't pant, didn't even wipe her face. She stood calm, steady, watching him like a craftsman studying material, calculating grain and fracture before the cut. That composure was louder than any chant. He forced himself forward again, wrestling her into the corner, hips under her, spine coiling for the big throw. For a second it worked, his back foot planted, arms locked. The crowd rose, sure this would be the moment, but her far hand slid to the ridge of his shoulder blade, her near elbow carving a small circle. His chest peeled away from hers just a finger's width, but it was enough. His lift collapsed mid-air. She stepped across, brushed his thigh with her hip, and pivoted. The throw that should have belonged to him ended with him flat on the mat, rolling to one knee, breath rattling. The arena erupted. A chant spread, small at first, then swelling like a wave. Ronda! R-O-N-D-A! Entire sections joined, voices overlapping until it felt unanimous. Johnson climbed to his feet, glassy-eyed under the lights. For the first time, he didn't just look angry, he looked unsure. The cameras zoomed close, catching the shine that wasn't just sweat. He spat, wiped his mouth, squared his stance, trying to reset geometry, as if straight lines could hide the crack in his confidence. But the noise told the truth. Even his loyalists were quieter now. The crowd had chosen sides. He lunged with another shoulder strike, fast and violent. She met it, slid, recovered instantly. He tried to corral her with wide arms. She tapped his sternum with an open palm, stealing half a step. He chased again, furious. She caught his wrist, spun out, and left him facing the ropes. He slapped the cable in frustration, the sound echoing like a gunshot. When he turned, the chant was deafening. Ronda stood 5 feet away, still calm, still composed, breathing like a metronome. She wasn't tired. She wasn't even flustered. He rolled his neck, jaw cracking audibly, and let something in him snap. Technique had failed him. Control mocked him. All that was left was force. You could see the decision from the highest seat in the arena. He crouched lower, fingers spread, shoulders loading like pistons. The referee shifted his stance, uneasy, reading the storm in his body language. The crowd fell into another hush, nervous, waiting for the collision. The cameras zoomed in, lenses whining. Johnson dug his feet into the canvas. He wasn't thinking of showmanship now. He wasn't thinking of control. He was thinking only of smashing through her. Across the ring, Ronda flexed her toes inside her shoes, testing the ground, as if sensing the earth itself about to move. The building held its breath. He went. He charged like a battering ram, legs driving, shoulders set to split her in half. The canvas shook under each step. For a moment the size of him filled the ring, and the sound of the crowd thinned into a single piercing note. Ronda braced, her body lowering, her hands loose but ready, eyes locked not on his face, but on the center of his chest. She wasn't watching the man. She was watching the angle. The collision came. His forearm smashed across her collarbone, hips grinding forward, arms wrapping tight. It worked for a breath. Her balance dipped, her heels skidding across the mat. The crowd roared, tasting the reversal. Johnson gritted his teeth, every muscle flexed to drive through. And then she slipped the trap. Her right arm threaded under his, palm sliding to the back of his wrist. Her left hand darted to his elbow, twisting it just enough to turn his massive frame into a crooked hinge. Her hip shifted a fraction, redirecting his momentum. His weight carried him forward, straight into her setup. In less than a second, his shoulder line broke. He tried to wrench free, but her grip tightened like steel. She pivoted, snapping her hips across his center, and his world spun. The audience gasped as his feet lifted clear of the mat. The Rock, airborne for real, not choreographed, not staged. His body crashed down with a slam that rattled the canvas. She was already on him before he could process. Her arms coiled around his, her legs locked his torso. It wasn't flashy, it was suffocating. A jiu-jitsu grip, clinical and merciless. Johnson thrashed, twisting, trying to rip himself free. The cameras closed in, catching the tension in his neck, the red blooming across his face. At first he fought with power. He kicked, rolled, tried to muscle his way out. Each time she adjusted, her hands tightening, her hips grinding down to steal air. He tried to rise. She dragged him sideways. He tried to pull an arm free. She fed it deeper into the trap. The crowd shifted from noise to a growl, the sound of thousands realizing what they were watching wasn't strength anymore, but survival. On the big screen, his face told the story. Eyes squeezed shut, veins bulging, lips peeling back in a grimace that wanted to look defiant, but looked closer to panic. The crowd saw it, saw him not performing, but suffering, and the sound swelled. "Don't let him go," someone shouted from the upper rows. Another voice, sharp, cut through. "He's done!" Johnson shook his head violently, teeth bared, sweat spraying under the lights. He wasn't done. Not yet. He pressed his forehead against the mat, body jerking, arms straining to rip free. His biceps quivered, every vein visible, but the lock only sank deeper. The referee hovered inches away, watching, palms twitching. Ronda shifted again. Subtle. Deadly. Her grip tightened across his jaw, pulling, her body arching. His back bent the wrong way. His mouth opened wide, not in a word, but in a sound. Raw, guttural, loud enough to carry even above the roar. The Rock screamed. The arena detonated. People stood, hands on their heads, some cheering, others stunned into silence. A woman in the front row covered her mouth, unable to watch. A man nearby slammed his palm against the barricade, eyes wide, veins standing in his neck as he shouted. On the giant screen, Johnson's face was agony. Teeth clenched, eyes wet, neck corded, his body caught between pride and submission. He dug his nails into the mat as if clawing for escape. The chant for Ronda thundered from every corner, but even that chant had an edge of disbelief. No one had imagined it could look like this. The referee crouched lower, ready to stop it if he had to. "Do you want to quit?" he asked, voice cutting through the chaos. Johnson shook his head, jaw snapping shut, refusing. Ronda didn't flinch. She pulled tighter, her legs squeezing, arms locked like a vice. His scream came again, harsher, breaking through every speaker in the building. It wasn't theatrical, it was real. The noise became unbearable. Thousands roaring, others silent, cameras zooming so close his pain filled the screens. A boy in the stands squeezed his father's hand, too scared to look but refusing to blink. And then, without warning, the lights above the ring flickered. For a second the arena plunged into half-darkness, the scream cut short, the noise sliced away. Silence, sharp and sudden, swallowed everything. The audience froze, every eye locked on the two figures in the center of the ring. Johnson was still trapped. Ronda's grip was still iron. His body trembled, teeth gritted. The question hung heavier than any cheer. Would he tap? The lights steadied again, humming above the ring. The silence broke with a roar, as if the building itself exhaled. In the center, Johnson was still caught. Ronda's grip welded tight around his arm and jaw. His body shook, legs kicking, his free hand clawing at the mat. Pride held him longer than muscle. The referee leaned close, eyes sharp, ready to end it. The crowd leaned too, thousands of bodies pulled toward the center by the same gravity. Johnson's scream came again, shorter, ragged, a sound of defiance bending into surrender. And then the hand came. Not dramatic, not staged, just 3 blunt taps of his palm against the canvas. Once, twice, a third, final. The bell rang like a gunshot. The arena detonated. People leapt from their seats, hands thrown high, strangers hugging strangers. The chant of her name thundered so loud it swallowed even the referee's signal. She wins! It's over. Ronda released him instantly. No hesitation, no cruelty. She slid back, uncoiling her arms, giving him space. Johnson stayed on his knees, chest heaving, head bowed. His hands pressed against the mat as if the ground itself had betrayed him. She didn't gloat, didn't raise her arms. She simply stood, shoulders square, face unreadable, waiting. The cameras zoomed in on Johnson. His eyes glistened, wet with something he hadn't planned on showing. He blinked, tried to mask it, but the lenses caught everything. His jaw quivered, teeth clenched too hard. He dragged a forearm across his face, smearing sweat, hiding nothing. The referee moved to help, but Ronda was there first. She reached down, offered a hand. For a second, he didn't look at it. Then, slowly, he took it. She pulled him to his feet with the same strength that had just broken him. The crowd roared louder, not for violence now, but for something else. Respect, maybe relief. People clapped above their heads, stamping feet, a rhythm that shook the rafters. Johnson steadied, shoulders heaving, head low. He glanced at her once, lips trembling as he tried to form words. The microphone wasn't near, but the cameras caught it anyway. I was wrong. That was all. 3 words, plain and cracked. Ronda didn't smile. She didn't need to. She nodded once, a small gesture. The cold confidence never leaving her face. The audience responded as if it were the ending they hadn't dared hope for. They rose to their feet, a stadium-wide ovation, chanting her name in waves. Ronda, R-O-N-D-A. It wasn't just celebration, it was testimony. On the giant screen, the split image told the truth. Johnson, eyes damp, swallowing pride, and Ronda, still and silent, her strength no longer in the hold, but in the restraint. The camera panned wider, catching faces in the crowd. Some shouted, some cried, some just stood stunned. And then, in the 3rd row, the lens found a boy no older than 10. He stood on his seat, fist clenched, mimicking the motion Ronda had made when she sealed the fight. Always, his lips moved with the chant, voice swallowed by the roar, but his expression carried it all. The broadcast cut back to the ring, where Johnson lifted her arm himself. Not the referee, him. His hand shook slightly as he raised hers, conceding in the only way he could. The stadium shook again, not with laughter, not with mockery, but with approval. Ronda's eyes didn't change. No smile, no softness, only the calm of someone who had already known how this would end. The ovation stretched on, long enough that it blurred into something larger than sport. It wasn't about strength anymore. It was about dignity, and how it looked when someone carried it without compromise. The final shot tightened on Ronda, her hand falling back to her side, shoulders relaxed, gaze steady. Beside her, Johnson stood with red eyes and bowed head. The arena still thundered, but the focus had shifted. It wasn't just about her victory. It was about what it meant to witness it. And in that single closing image, the boy's fist in the air, the roar of a stadium, the quiet nod of the victor, something passed forward. A fragment of defiance, a measure of strength, an inheritance of character. The story ended not with celebration, but with certainty. She hadn't only won, she had proven.